Question 1. System analysis indicates a potential for significant cost savings by engaging a new supplier for a critical component. However, preliminary information suggests this supplier operates in a region with less stringent labor and environmental regulations, and their initial responses to sustainability inquiries have been vague. What is the most ethically and professionally responsible approach to process optimization in this scenario? Adhering to the principles of supply chain sustainability and ethics relevant to professional supply management. Option A. Outsource the entire ethical and sustainability assessment to a third-party consultant without establishing internal oversight or clear criteria for their evaluation, relying solely on their final report. Option B. Conduct comprehensive due diligence on the supplier's labor practices, environmental impact, and ethical conduct through independent audits and verification, and integrate these findings into the supplier selection decision alongside cost. Option C. Accept the supplier's self-reported sustainability and ethical compliance statements at face value and proceed with the engagement, focusing on contractual terms for delivery and quality. Option D. Proceed with engaging the supplier based on the lowest price, assuming that their adherence to local regulations is sufficient and that any ethical concerns are secondary to cost optimization. Correct answer is B. Conduct comprehensive due diligence on the supplier's labor practices, environmental impact, and ethical conduct through independent audits and verification, and integrate these findings into the supplier selection decision alongside cost. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in supply chain management, where the pursuit of cost efficiency can conflict with ethical and sustainability imperatives. Professional challenge lies in balancing the immediate financial benefits of a lower-cost supplier against the potential long-term risks and ethical breaches associated with that supplier's practices. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the supply chain not only delivers value, but also operates responsibly and in compliance with relevant ethical standards and potential regulatory expectations, even if not explicitly codified as law in all instances. The correct approach involves conducting a thorough due diligence process that extends beyond price to encompass the supplier's environmental, social, and governance-esque performance. This includes verifying their labor practices, environmental impact, and adherence to ethical business conduct. This approach is professionally sound because it aligns with the growing expectation for corporate social responsibility and ethical sourcing, which are increasingly being integrated into procurement policies and industry best practices. While specific laws may vary, the underlying ethical principles of fair labor, environmental stewardship, and transparency are universally recognized and often underpin voluntary industry standards and customer expectations, which can have de facto regulatory force through market pressure and reputational risk. An incorrect approach would be to immediately select the supplier solely based on the lowest price, without any further investigation. This fails to address potential ethical and sustainability risks, such as the use of forced labor, unsafe working conditions, or significant environmental pollution. Such a decision could lead to severe reputational damage, legal liabilities if specific labor or environmental laws are violated, and a breakdown in trust with stakeholders, including customers and investors. Another incorrect approach would be to rely solely on the supplier's self-reported information regarding their ethical and sustainability practices, without independent verification. While self-reporting is a starting point, it is insufficient to ensure compliance. This approach is flawed because it lacks the rigor necessary to uncover potential misrepresentations or systemic issues within the supplier's operations, leaving the organization vulnerable to ethical lapses and potential regulatory scrutiny if those lapses are discovered. A further incorrect approach would be to delegate the entire responsibility for assessing supplier ethics and sustainability to a single department without cross-functional input. Ethical and sustainability considerations are broad and impact various aspects of the business, including legal, compliance, and public relations. Without a collaborative approach, critical risks may be overlooked, and the organization's response to identified issues may be fragmented and ineffective. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a risk-based assessment framework. This framework begins with identifying potential ethical and sustainability risks associated with different sourcing options. It then involves developing criteria for evaluating suppliers against these risks, including the need for independent verification of claims. Procurement professionals should engage cross-functional teams, including legal, compliance, and sustainability experts, to ensure a comprehensive evaluation. Finally, the decision should be based on a holistic assessment that balances cost with ethical and sustainability performance, prioritizing long-term value and risk mitigation over short-term savings. Question 2. The evaluation methodology shows a need to improve the integration of demand forecasts into supply chain planning, considering the principles of process optimization within the CPSM framework. Which of the following approaches best addresses this challenge while adhering to ethical and professional standards? Option A. Rely exclusively on advanced statistical models that analyze historical sales data to generate highly precise forecasts, assuming that past trends will perfectly predict future demand without external validation. Option B. Focus solely on demand sensing technologies to capture real-time transactional data, disregarding the need for longer-term strategic forecasting and collaborative planning with upstream suppliers. Option C. Implement a robust forecasting system that combines historical quantitative data analysis with qualitative insights from sales and marketing, establishes clear forecast accuracy metrics, and incorporates a feedback loop for continuous error management and collaborative refinement with key supply chain partners. Option D. Automate the forecasting process to generate rapid predictions, prioritizing speed and volume of forecasts over the accuracy and collaborative input from cross-functional teams. The correct answer is C. Implement a robust forecasting system that combines historical quantitative data analysis with qualitative insights from sales and marketing, establishes clear forecast accuracy metrics, and incorporates a feedback loop for continuous error management and collaborative refinement with key supply chain partners. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for accurate demand forecasts with the practical limitations of data availability and the collaborative nature of supply chain planning. The pressure to optimize processes often leads to the temptation to oversimplify or bypass crucial steps, which can have significant downstream consequences. Careful judgment is required to select a forecasting approach that is both effective and ethically sound, ensuring that decisions are based on reliable information and that all stakeholders are appropriately involved. The correct approach involves a multifaceted strategy that integrates qualitative insights with quantitative data, acknowledges the inherent uncertainty in forecasting, and establishes clear metrics for measuring accuracy. This aligns with the principles of responsible supply chain management, which emphasize transparency, collaboration, and continuous improvement. By employing a combination of techniques and actively managing forecast error, organizations can build more resilient and efficient supply chains. This approach is ethically justified as it promotes informed decision-making and avoids misleading stakeholders with overly optimistic or inaccurate projections. An incorrect approach that relies solely on historical quantitative data without considering market intelligence or expert opinion fails to account for external factors that can significantly impact demand. This can lead to inaccurate forecasts and subsequent supply chain disruptions, potentially violating ethical obligations to customers and suppliers by failing to meet commitments. Another incorrect approach that ignores forecast accuracy metrics and the process of managing forecast error is professionally negligent. Without understanding how accurate forecasts are, and without mechanisms to correct deviations, an organization risks making suboptimal decisions, wasting resources, and failing to adapt to changing market conditions. This lack of diligence can be seen as a failure to uphold professional standards of care. A third incorrect approach that bypasses collaborative forecasting processes, excluding key stakeholders, undermines the integrity of the planning process. This can lead to misaligned expectations, internal conflict, and ultimately, a less effective supply chain, which is ethically questionable as it does not foster a shared understanding and commitment to supply chain goals. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the specific context and objectives of the demand planning process. This involves identifying available data, potential influencing factors, both internal and external, and the capabilities of forecasting tools. Next, they should evaluate different forecasting techniques, considering their suitability for the product or service in question and the available data. Crucially, the process must include mechanisms for validation, such as accuracy metrics, and a plan for managing deviations. Finally, fostering open communication and collaboration among all relevant departments and external partners is essential to ensure buy-in and to leverage collective knowledge for the most robust forecast possible. Question 3. Governance review demonstrates that the current supply chain network design is heavily optimized for cost efficiency, with limited redundancy in key nodes and reliance on a few critical suppliers. Considering the potential for global disruptions and the need to ensure consistent product availability, which of the following approaches best addresses the identified vulnerabilities while aligning with responsible supply chain practices? Option A. Proceed with further cost reduction initiatives by consolidating remaining distribution centers into a single, highly automated facility to achieve maximum economies of scale. Option B. Focus solely on enhancing supplier performance metrics without re-evaluating the overall network structure or risk exposure. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive supply chain risk assessment to identify potential vulnerabilities, evaluate their impact, and integrate mitigation strategies such as supplier diversification, strategic inventory placement, and alternative transportation routes into the network design. Option D. Implement a just-in-time inventory system across all product lines to minimize holding costs and maximize operational agility. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive supply chain risk assessment to identify potential vulnerabilities, evaluate their impact, and integrate mitigation strategies such as supplier diversification, strategic inventory placement, and alternative transportation routes into the network design. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing competing objectives within supply chain design, specifically the drive for efficiency and cost reduction against the imperative of robust risk management and regulatory compliance. The chosen approach must not only optimize the supply chain, but also proactively identify and mitigate potential disruptions, ensuring business continuity and adherence to relevant regulations. The correct approach involves a comprehensive risk assessment integrated into the network design process. This means systematically identifying potential risks across the supply chain, such as geopolitical instability, natural disasters, supplier financial distress, or transportation disruptions. For each identified risk, the organization must then evaluate its likelihood and potential impact on operations, cost, and customer service. Based on this assessment, mitigation strategies are developed and incorporated into the network design, such as diversifying supplier bases, establishing buffer stock at strategic locations, or selecting transportation routes with lower risk profiles. This proactive and integrated approach aligns with best practices in supply chain management and demonstrates due diligence in safeguarding operations, which is implicitly expected under general business governance principles and can have direct implications for regulatory compliance in areas like product availability and safety. An incorrect approach would be to solely focus on cost optimization without a commensurate evaluation of associated risks. This might involve consolidating warehouses into a single, low-cost location, or relying on a single, high-volume supplier to achieve economies of scale. The regulatory and ethical failure here lies in the potential for significant disruption to product availability, which could violate contractual obligations, lead to customer dissatisfaction, and in regulated industries, potentially impact consumer safety or access to essential goods. Such an approach demonstrates a lack of foresight and a failure to adequately consider the resilience of the supply chain, which can have legal and reputational consequences. Another incorrect approach would be to implement a network design based on outdated or incomplete data regarding supplier capabilities or transportation infrastructure. This could lead to unforeseen bottlenecks, delays, and increased costs, potentially exposing the organization to breaches of service-level agreements or regulatory noncompliance if product delivery timelines are critical. The failure is in the lack of due diligence and the reliance on potentially flawed information, which can result in operational failures and a lack of preparedness for real-world supply chain dynamics. Finally, an approach that prioritizes speed and agility without considering the potential for increased risk is also flawed. While responsiveness is valuable, a design that relies on highly complex, just-in-time logistics with minimal redundancy might be vulnerable to even minor disruptions. The regulatory and ethical concern is that such a brittle system could lead to widespread stockouts or delivery failures, impacting customers and potentially violating commitments, especially in sectors where consistent supply is mandated. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk management framework integrated into every stage of supply chain design. This includes defining the scope of the assessment, identifying potential risks, analyzing their likelihood and impact, developing and implementing mitigation strategies, and continuously monitoring and reviewing the effectiveness of these measures. Professionals must prioritize a holistic view that balances efficiency with resilience and compliance, ensuring that the designed supply chain can withstand foreseeable disruptions and meet all regulatory and ethical obligations. Question 4. Research into a mid-sized electronics manufacturer reveals that a significant portion of their revenue comes from custom-configured industrial control systems. These systems require specific component combinations and software settings tailored to each client's unique operational environment. The remaining revenue is generated from standard, off-the-shelf sensor modules that are consistently in high demand across various industries. The company currently employs a uniform production strategy across all product lines, leading to substantial inventory costs for the custom systems and occasional stockouts of the popular sensor modules. Considering the principles of production planning and scheduling, which of the following approaches would best address the company's challenges while aligning with efficient and customer-centric supply chain practices? Option A. Transition all product lines to a make-to-stock strategy to ensure immediate availability for all customer orders. Option B. Adopt a pure assembled order strategy for all product lines to maximize flexibility. Option C. Implement a make-to-order strategy for the custom-configured industrial control systems and a make-to-stock strategy for the standard sensor modules, supported by a robust master production schedule and capacity planning. Option D. Eliminate formal production planning and scheduling, relying solely on immediate customer orders to drive production. The correct answer is C. Implement a make-to-order strategy for the custom-configured industrial control systems and a make-to-stock strategy for the standard sensor modules, supported by a robust master production schedule and capacity planning. Explanation: this scenario presents a common challenge in supply chain management, balancing responsiveness to customer demand with the efficiency of production operations. The core tension lies between the flexibility required to meet diverse customer needs and the cost-effectiveness of standardized production. A professional in supply chain management must navigate these competing priorities while adhering to ethical business practices and relevant regulations, which in the context of the CPSM exam are generally understood to align with principles of fair competition, transparency, and responsible business conduct, without specific jurisdictional mandates beyond general business law. The correct approach involves a strategic alignment of production planning with market, demand characteristics, and customer expectations. A make-to-order (MTO) strategy, when appropriate, allows for customization and minimizes finished goods inventory, directly addressing the need for tailored solutions. This approach is ethically sound as it avoids unnecessary waste and ensures that resources are utilized efficiently based on confirmed demand. It aligns with principles of responsible resource management and can lead to higher customer satisfaction by delivering exactly what was ordered. An incorrect approach would be to rigidly apply a make-to-stock (MTS) strategy without considering the specific needs of the high-value, customized components. This would lead to significant inventory holding costs for products that may not sell, or worse, the inability to fulfill specific customer requirements if the standard stock does not match their unique needs. Ethically, this could be viewed as inefficient use of company resources and potentially lead to customer dissatisfaction, impacting the company's reputation. Another incorrect approach would be to adopt a pure assembled order auto strategy for all product lines, including those with highly standardized components. ATO offers a balance. Forcing it onto products that are consistently demanded in a standard configuration would negate the benefits of economies of scale achievable through a more streamlined make-to-stock process for those specific items. This could result in higher per-unit costs and longer lead times for customers who would be better served by a readily available product. Ethically, this represents a failure to optimize operations for customer benefit and shareholder value. Finally, a purely reactive approach without any form of master production scheduling or capacity planning would be highly detrimental. This would lead to chaotic production, frequent expediting, and an inability to reliably meet delivery dates, regardless of the chosen production strategy. Such a lack of planning is professionally irresponsible, leading to operational inefficiencies, increased costs, and potential breaches of contractual obligations with customers. Professionals should approach this by first segmenting their product portfolio based on demand patterns, customization levels, and customer expectations. For products with high customization and variable demand, MTO or ATO might be suitable. For standardized high-volume products, MTS can be more efficient. The Master Production Schedule, MPS, should then be developed based on these strategic choices, considering sales forecasts and actual orders. Capacity planning is crucial to ensure that the chosen production strategy is feasible. Lean manufacturing principles and JIT can then be applied to optimize the flow within the chosen production system, reducing waste and improving efficiency. MRP systems can support the planning and execution of these strategies by managing materials and production orders. Question 5. To address the challenge of optimizing supply chain costs while maintaining responsiveness to market demands, a supply chain manager is evaluating different network design strategies. The organization operates under a framework that emphasizes ethical sourcing and compliance with all applicable trade regulations. Which of the following approaches best aligns with these requirements for developing a robust and compliant supply chain strategy? Option A. Prioritizing a highly decentralized network with numerous local suppliers to maximize responsiveness, without a formal process for vetting their compliance with ethical sourcing standards or trade laws. Option B. Focusing exclusively on minimizing inventory holding costs by consolidating all production into a single, highly efficient facility, even if it significantly increases lead times and reliance on a limited supplier base. Option C. Adopting a hybrid network design that strategically diversifies suppliers across multiple regions, balancing cost-effectiveness with robust risk assessment, supplier due diligence on ethical practices, and adherence to all relevant trade and labor regulations. Option D. Implementing a lean, centralized distribution network with suppliers located in regions offering the lowest direct manufacturing and transportation costs, regardless of their compliance track record or labor practices. The correct answer is D. Implementing a lean, centralized distribution network with suppliers located in regions offering the lowest direct manufacturing and transportation costs, regardless of their compliance track record or labor practices. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a supply chain manager to balance competing strategic objectives, cost reduction, and responsiveness within the constraints of a specific regulatory environment. The decision impacts not only operational efficiency, but also compliance and ethical considerations related to sourcing and supplier relationships. Careful judgment is required to ensure the chosen strategy aligns with both business goals and the governing regulatory framework. The correct approach involves a comprehensive assessment of supply chain network design options, considering the total cost of ownership, risk mitigation, and alignment with the organization's strategic objectives, all while adhering to the specified regulatory framework. This approach is professionally sound because it prioritizes a holistic view of the supply chain, ensuring that cost savings do not come at the expense of compliance, ethical sourcing, or long-term supply chain resilience. Adherence to the regulatory framework, which in the context of CPSM Module 2 typically implies adherence to ethical sourcing principles and relevant trade regulations, is paramount. This ensures that the chosen design is not only economically viable, but also legally and ethically defensible, preventing potential penalties, reputational damage, and disruptions. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on minimizing direct transportation and manufacturing costs without considering the total cost of ownership, including potential risks and compliance overhead, is professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a myopic view that overlooks the broader implications of supply chain design. For instance, selecting a supplier in a jurisdiction with lax labor laws or environmental regulations, even if cheaper, could lead to significant ethical breaches and potential legal repercussions under the principles of responsible supply chain management, emphasized in professional certifications. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes speed and proximity of suppliers without a thorough risk assessment of their operational stability and compliance history is also professionally flawed. While responsiveness is a key supply chain attribute, choosing suppliers based on this alone without due diligence regarding their adherence to ethical standards, quality controls, and regulatory requirements can expose the organization to significant risks, including product recalls, supply disruptions due to noncompliance, and damage to brand reputation. A third incorrect approach that involves implementing a highly centralized supply chain solely for control purposes, without evaluating its impact on lead times, responsiveness to market changes, and potential single points of failure, is also professionally unsound. While control is important, an inflexible design can hinder agility and increase vulnerability, potentially leading to missed market opportunities or inability to respond effectively to disruptions, which indirectly impacts compliance by making it harder to manage dispersed supplier relationships effectively. Professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Define clear strategic objectives for the supply chain, encompassing cost, responsiveness, resilience, and compliance. 2. Conduct a thorough analysis of potential supply chain designs, evaluating each against these objectives. 3. Perform a comprehensive risk assessment for each design, including regulatory, ethical, operational, and financial risks. 4. Engage relevant stakeholders, including legal, compliance, and operations teams, to ensure all perspectives are considered. 5. Select the design that offers the best balance of strategic objectives and risk mitigation, with a strong emphasis on regulatory and ethical compliance. 6. Continuously monitor and adapt the supply chain design as market conditions and regulatory landscapes evolve. Question 6. Analysis of a supply chain manager's decision to implement a single inventory control system across all product categories within a diverse organization, considering the varying demand patterns, lead times, and value of these products. Which of the following approaches best reflects a strategic and efficient inventory management strategy aligned with CPSM principles? Option A. Implementing a continuous review system for all inventory items to ensure maximum control and minimize stockouts. Option B. Utilizing a differentiated approach, employing continuous review for high-value, high-demand items and periodic review for lower-value, lower-demand items. Option C. Applying a periodic review system to all inventory items to simplify ordering and reduce administrative overhead. Option D. Adopting vendor-managed inventory, VMI, for all product categories to leverage supplier expertise and reduce internal management effort. Correct answer is A. Implementing a continuous review system for all inventory items to ensure maximum control and minimize stockouts. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in supply chain management, balancing inventory costs with service levels. The professional challenge lies in selecting the most appropriate inventory control system for a diverse product portfolio, where different items have varying demand patterns, lead times, and criticality to the business. A one-size-fits-all approach is rarely optimal, and misjudging the control system can lead to excessive holding costs, stockouts, or inefficient use of resources. The CPSM framework emphasizes strategic decision-making that aligns with organizational objectives and ethical considerations, making the choice of inventory control system a critical judgment call. Correct approach analysis. Implementing a continuous review system for high-value, high-demand items, and a periodic review system for lower-value, lower-demand items, C items, represents best professional practice. This approach leverages the strengths of each system. Continuous review systems, often employing reorder points, are ideal for items because they minimize holding costs by ordering only when necessary and maintaining tighter control over stock levels, thus reducing the risk of obsolescence and carrying costs for expensive inventory. Periodic review systems are more cost-effective for C items, as they reduce the administrative burden of constant monitoring and ordering, allowing for less frequent, consolidated orders. This differentiated strategy aligns with the principles of ABC analysis and optimizes resource allocation, directly supporting the goal of efficient supply chain operations, as outlined in CPSM principles. Ethically, this approach demonstrates responsible stewardship of company resources by minimizing waste and maximizing value. Incorrect approach is analysis. Applying a continuous review system to all inventory items, regardless of classification, would be an inefficient and costly approach. While it offers tight control, the administrative overhead and frequent ordering for low-value C items would significantly increase operational costs without a commensurate benefit in service levels or risk reduction. This fails to adhere to the principle of optimizing resource utilization. Using a periodic review system for all inventory items, particularly for high-value items, would lead to suboptimal inventory levels. Periodic reviews can result in higher average inventory levels and increased risk of stockouts between review periods, especially for items with volatile demand. This could negatively impact customer service and potentially lead to lost sales, failing to meet the strategic objective of maintaining adequate supply for critical items. Implementing vendor-managed inventory, VMI, for all product categories without a thorough analysis of demand variability, supplier capability, and product criticality would be a premature and potentially detrimental decision. While VMI can be highly effective for certain items, it requires a strong partnership and trust. Applying it universally without considering these factors could lead to misaligned expectations, increased stockouts if the vendor misjudges demand, or excessive inventory if the vendor overestimates. This approach neglects the foundational principles of inventory classification and control system selection based on item characteristics. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach inventory management by first conducting a thorough ABC analysis to classify inventory based on value and demand. Following this, they should evaluate the characteristics of each inventory class, demand variability, lead time, criticality, cost, to determine the most suitable inventory control system. For items, continuous review systems are generally preferred for tighter control and cost efficiency. For C items, periodic review systems often offer a better balance of control and administrative cost. B items may warrant a hybrid approach or careful consideration based on specific circumstances. Vendor-managed inventory and consignment inventory should be considered as strategic tools for specific product categories where the benefits of partnership and shared risk outweigh the implementation complexities. The decision-making process must always prioritize alignment with organizational goals, cost-effectiveness, and customer service levels, while adhering to ethical standards of resource management. Question 7. The investigation demonstrates that a company's warehouse management system, WMS, and transportation management system, TMS, are operating independently, with significant manual data transfer between them and the enterprise resource planning, ERP system. This has led to discrepancies in inventory levels and delayed shipment confirmations. Which of the following approaches best addresses the underlying risks to supply chain execution and data integrity? Option A. Implement a policy of increased manual oversight and cross-checking of data between systems to minimize errors, accepting the associated labor costs. Option B. Conduct a thorough risk assessment to identify vulnerabilities in system integration and data management, prioritizing solutions that enhance data flow and accuracy across WMS, TMS, and ERP. Option C. Prioritize immediate cost reduction by delaying any further investment in system integration or data management improvements until a future budget cycle. Option D. Focus on optimizing the individual performance of WMS and TMS, assuming that improved standalone efficiency will eventually resolve integration issues. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough risk assessment to identify vulnerabilities in system integration and data management, prioritizing solutions that enhance data flow and accuracy across WMS, TMS, and ERP. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a supply chain manager to balance the immediate need for operational efficiency with the long-term risks associated with inadequate system integration and data management. The CPSM framework emphasizes ethical conduct and adherence to best practices, which include ensuring the integrity and security of supply chain data. A failure to properly integrate systems like WMS, TMS, and ERP can lead to data silos, inaccuracies, and potential compliance issues, especially concerning traceability and auditability. The correct approach involves a comprehensive risk assessment that prioritizes the identification and mitigation of vulnerabilities arising from poor system integration and data management. This aligns with the CPSM emphasis on proactive risk management and due diligence. By systematically evaluating potential data breaches, operational disruptions, and compliance failures stemming from disparate systems, a supply chain manager can develop targeted strategies to enhance integration, implement robust data governance, and ensure data accuracy and security. This proactive stance is ethically sound as it protects the organization's assets, reputation, and stakeholders. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the immediate cost savings of maintaining separate, unintegrated systems fails to acknowledge the significant downstream risks. This approach is ethically questionable, as it prioritizes short-term financial gains over long-term operational stability and data integrity, potentially exposing the organization to greater financial and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach that relies on manual data reconciliation between systems, while seemingly a solution, is inherently prone to human error and is not scalable or efficient for complex supply chains. This can lead to inaccurate reporting and decision-making, undermining the very purpose of implementing these systems and potentially violating principles of data accuracy and reliability. A third incorrect approach that neglects the security implications of data flow between systems overlooks critical cybersecurity risks, leaving the organization vulnerable to data breaches and noncompliance with data protection regulations. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with understanding the interconnectedness of supply chain systems and the critical role of data. This involves identifying potential risks associated with each system and their interactions, assessing the likelihood and impact of these risks, and then developing mitigation strategies. Prioritizing solutions that enhance integration, data quality, and security, even if they involve initial investment, is crucial for sustainable and ethical supply chain management. Question 8. During the evaluation of the monthly sales and operations planning S&OP cycle, the sales director presents a significantly inflated demand forecast for a key product, citing aggressive new marketing initiatives. However, the supply chain team's analysis indicates that current production capacity and raw material availability cannot support this projected demand without incurring substantial overtime and expedited freight costs, potentially leading to quality compromises. The sales director urges the S&OP team to adjust the forecast upwards in the official report to reflect their optimistic outlook, arguing that this will motivate the organization and secure necessary resources for future capacity expansion. Which of the following approaches best represents ethical and professional conduct within the S&OP framework? Option A. Present the sales director's inflated demand forecast as the official forecast, while internally noting the supply chain team's concerns as a separate, less prominent addendum, to avoid discouraging the sales team and to maintain a positive organizational outlook. Option B. Present the demand forecast as analyzed by the supply chain team, highlighting the potential supply constraints and associated costs, and facilitate a cross-functional discussion to determine the most viable path forward, which may include realistic demand adjustments or strategic sourcing initiatives. Option C. Focus solely on the sales team's forecast, as their projections are directly tied to revenue generation, and instruct the supply chain team to find ways to meet the demand, regardless of the immediate cost or operational feasibility. Option D. Adjust the demand forecast upwards to align with the sales director's optimistic projections, assuming that the necessary operational improvements will materialize to meet the demand, and defer discussions about supply chain limitations until later in the planning cycle. The correct answer is B. Present the demand forecast as analyzed by the supply chain team, highlighting the potential supply constraints and associated costs, and facilitate a cross-functional discussion to determine the most viable path forward, which may include realistic demand adjustments or strategic sourcing initiatives. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between short-term sales targets and the long-term sustainability of the supply chain, a core concern within sales and operations planning S&OP. The pressure to meet immediate revenue goals can lead to decisions that compromise supply chain integrity, potentially violating ethical principles of responsible business conduct and the spirit of S&OP, which aims for balanced planning. Careful judgment is required to navigate these competing interests while adhering to professional standards. The correct approach involves a commitment to transparently communicating the demand forecast and its implications for supply capacity to all stakeholders. This aligns with the principles of integrated business planning and ethical supply chain management, emphasizing honesty and data-driven decision-making. By presenting the unvarnished reality of the demand forecast, even if it indicates potential shortfalls, the S&OP team upholds its responsibility to provide accurate information for strategic decision-making. This approach fosters trust and allows for collaborative problem-solving to address potential supply constraints or to manage customer expectations realistically, thereby preventing future disruptions and reputational damage. This aligns with the ethical obligation to act with integrity and avoid misleading stakeholders. An incorrect approach involves manipulating the demand forecast to appear more achievable or to mask potential supply chain weaknesses. This is ethically unsound as it misrepresents the true state of affairs to senior management and potentially to customers. Such actions undermine the integrity of the S&OP process, which relies on accurate data for effective planning. This can lead to poor strategic decisions, such as overpromising delivery dates or committing to production levels that cannot be met, ultimately damaging customer relationships and the company's reputation. Also violates the professional responsibility to provide objective and truthful information. Another incorrect approach is to solely focus on the sales team's immediate needs without considering the operational realities and supply chain capabilities. This siloed thinking is antithetical to the integrated nature of S&OP. It ignores the potential for supply chain disruptions, increased costs due to expedited shipping or overtime, and the risk of stockouts, all of which can negatively impact profitability and customer satisfaction in the long run. Ethically, it fails to consider the broader impact on all stakeholders, including operations, finance, and customers. A third incorrect approach is to present a highly optimistic but unsupported supply plan that assumes future improvements or unproven capacity expansions will materialize. This is a form of wishful thinking that bypasses the rigorous analysis required in S&OP. It creates a false sense of security and can lead to significant problems when the anticipated improvements do not occur, resulting in missed deadlines, customer dissatisfaction, and financial penalties. This approach lacks professional diligence and the commitment to factual representation that is essential for effective S&OP. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a structured approach. First, accurately assess the demand forecast and its implications for supply. Second, engage in open and honest communication with all relevant departments, presenting the data and potential challenges. Third, facilitate collaborative problem-solving to identify realistic solutions, which may involve adjusting sales targets, exploring alternative supply options, or managing customer expectations. Finally, document all decisions and their rationale to ensure accountability and continuous improvement of the S&OP process. Question 9. The performance metrics show a significant increase in supply chain visibility and predictive accuracy since the recent integration of Internet of Things, IoT, sensors and artificial intelligence, AI, algorithms for demand forecasting. However, concerns have been raised internally regarding the potential implications of the vast amounts of customer and supplier data being collected and processed by these new systems on regulatory compliance. Given the organization operates primarily within the United States, which of the following actions is the most appropriate regulatory compliance approach? Option A. Continue with the current data handling practices, assuming they are sufficient as no specific data privacy violations have been reported yet. Option B. Implement additional AI and IoT solutions to further enhance supply chain operations, without first establishing comprehensive data governance policies and security protocols for the existing systems. Option C. Prioritize further investment in advanced AI and IoT solutions to maximize operational benefits, deferring any detailed regulatory compliance review until a later stage. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive review of current data handling practices in light of the new AI and IoT deployments, ensuring alignment with relevant U.S. data privacy and security regulations, and update policies and procedures accordingly. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive review of current data handling practices in light of the new AI and IoT deployments, ensuring alignment with relevant U.S. data privacy and security regulations, and update policies and procedures accordingly. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in modern supply chain management, where the adoption of advanced technologies like AI and IoT is driven by the promise of enhanced visibility and efficiency. However, the rapid deployment of these technologies can outpace the development and implementation of robust data governance and privacy protocols. The professional challenge lies in balancing the pursuit of operational improvements with the imperative to comply with relevant regulations, particularly concerning data handling and security. Failure to do so can lead to significant legal, financial, and reputational damage. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the implementation of technology aligns with legal obligations and ethical considerations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review of the organization's data handling practices in light of the new AI and EOT deployments, specifically referencing the U.S. regulatory framework applicable to supply chain data. This includes ensuring compliance with relevant data privacy laws such as the California Consumer Privacy Act, CCPA, if applicable, and any sector-specific regulations that might govern the types of data being collected and processed. It also necessitates a thorough assessment of the security measures in place to protect this data from breaches, aligning with general principles of data security and potentially NIST guidelines for cybersecurity. The focus is on proactive identification and mitigation of risks associated with data collection, storage, and usage by new technologies, ensuring that the supply chain operations remain compliant and secure. Incorrect approaches analysis. Continuing with the current data handling practices without a specific review is professionally unacceptable because it represents a failure to adapt to new technological realities and their associated regulatory implications. This approach ignores the potential for increased data collection and processing by AI and EOT systems, which could inadvertently violate privacy laws or data security standards. Focusing solely on the operational benefits of AI and EOT, such as improved forecasting or real-time tracking, without considering the regulatory compliance aspects, is also a significant failure. While operational efficiency is a key objective, it cannot come at the expense of legal and ethical obligations. This oversight can lead to non-compliance with data protection laws, resulting in penalties and loss of trust. Implementing additional AI and EOT solutions without first establishing clear data governance policies and security protocols is a reckless approach. It exacerbates the risk of non-compliance by introducing more data streams and processing capabilities without adequate safeguards. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the potential legal and ethical ramifications of uncontrolled data handling. Professional reasoning. Professionals in supply chain management must adopt a proactive and risk-aware approach when integrating new technologies. The decision-making process should involve 1. Identifying all relevant regulatory frameworks applicable to the data being handled, considering the jurisdiction and the nature of the data. 2. Conducting a thorough risk assessment of how new technologies impact data collection, storage, processing, and sharing. 3. Developing and implementing clear data governance policies and robust security measures that align with regulatory requirements and best practices. 4. Regularly reviewing and updating these policies and measures as technology evolves and regulations change. 5. Prioritizing compliance and ethical considerations alongside operational objectives. Question 10. System analysis indicates that a key sales executive has requested a significant deviation from the current supply chain sourcing strategy, citing an immediate opportunity to secure a large contract. This request, if implemented without careful consideration, could impact established lead times and inventory levels, potentially affecting other customer segments. Which approach best aligns with the principles of aligning supply chain strategy with overall business strategy and managing supply chain risk and agility? Option A. Conduct a thorough analysis of the executive's request, evaluating its alignment with current supply chain goals, KPI, market dynamics, and potential impact on overall business strategy and risk profile. Then engage in a collaborative discussion to explore feasible integration or alternative solutions. Option B. Immediately approve the sourcing deviation to capitalize on the potential large contract, as securing significant revenue is the primary business objective. Option C. Reject the request outright, as any deviation from the established sourcing strategy poses an unacceptable risk to current operational stability and performance metrics. Option D. Implement the requested sourcing deviation temporarily to satisfy the sales executive, with a plan to revert to the original strategy after the contract is secured. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough analysis of the executive's request, evaluating its alignment with current supply chain goals, KPI, market dynamics, and potential impact on overall business strategy and risk profile. Then engage in a collaborative discussion to explore feasible integration or alternative solutions. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate needs of a key internal stakeholder with the long-term strategic objectives of the supply chain and the broader business. Misalignment can lead to suboptimal resource allocation, missed strategic opportunities, and damaged interdepartmental relationships. The CPSM framework emphasizes a holistic, strategic approach to supply chain management, necessitating careful consideration of how individual requests fit into the larger picture. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a structured process of evaluating the stakeholders' request against the established supply chain strategy and objectives. This includes assessing its alignment with market dynamics, customer needs, and identified KPIs. If the request supports or enhances these strategic elements, it should be prioritized. If it deviates or conflicts, collaborative discussion is needed to explore alternatives or to educate the stakeholder on the strategic rationale. This aligns with the CPSM principle of ensuring supply chain strategy directly supports overall business strategy and is driven by market realities and customer value. Incorrect approaches analysis. Prioritizing the request solely based on the stakeholder's influence or perceived urgency without strategic alignment is an ethical failure. It can lead to inefficient resource allocation, potentially undermining established KPIs and strategic goals, and demonstrating a lack of professional judgment in adhering to the overarching business strategy. This approach neglects the systematic analysis required by the CPSM framework. Accepting the request without any evaluation, assuming it is beneficial, is also an ethical failure. It bypasses the critical steps of analyzing competitive landscapes, market dynamics, and customer needs, which are foundational to developing a robust supply chain strategy. This reactive approach can lead to unintended negative consequences for the supply chain's performance and resilience. Rejecting the request outright without understanding the stakeholders' underlying needs or exploring potential compromises is a failure in stakeholder management and collaborative strategy development. While strategic alignment is crucial, a rigid refusal can damage interdepartmental relationships and prevent potential opportunities for innovation or improvement that the stakeholders' request might represent, even if in its initial form it is not perfectly aligned. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the request's context and its potential impact on strategic objectives. This involves active listening to the stakeholder, followed by an objective assessment against defined supply chain goals, KPI, and market intelligence. If alignment exists, proceed with integration. If not, engage in a dialogue to explain the strategic rationale, explore modifications to the request, or identify alternative solutions that achieve both the stakeholders' needs and the strategic objectives. This iterative, collaborative, and strategy-driven approach ensures that supply chain decisions are not only effective, but also ethically sound and professionally responsible. Question 11. Comparative studies suggest that the integration of advanced analytics and AI-powered platforms can significantly enhance supply chain visibility and predictive capabilities. A supply chain manager is considering adopting a new AI-driven platform that promises to optimize inventory levels and forecast demand with unprecedented accuracy. However, the platform's data collection methods involve extensive aggregation of supplier performance metrics, some of which are proprietary and sensitive. The manager must decide on the best approach to evaluate and potentially implement this technology, ensuring compliance with the regulatory framework for the Certified Professional in Supply Management, CPSM, Module 2, Supply Chain Management. Option A. Prioritize the adoption of the AI platform due to its potential for significant cost savings and efficiency improvements, assuming that any data privacy concerns can be addressed post-implementation. Option B. Negotiate a limited data sharing agreement with suppliers for the AI platform, focusing only on publicly available performance data to minimize potential compliance risks. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive due diligence process that includes a thorough assessment of the AI platform's data security, privacy implications, and compliance with all relevant supply chain regulations, involving legal and IT security teams before any decision is made. Option D. Implement the AI platform immediately to gain a competitive advantage, focusing on its operational benefits and deferring any detailed regulatory review until after the system is fully operational. The correct answer is A. Prioritize the adoption of the AI platform due to its potential for significant cost savings and efficiency improvements, assuming that any data privacy concerns can be addressed post-implementation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a supply chain manager to balance the potential benefits of innovative technology with the established regulatory compliance and ethical considerations inherent in supply chain operations. The decision-making process must prioritize adherence to the specific regulatory framework governing the Certified Professional in Supply Management, CPSM Module 2, Supply Chain Management, which implicitly emphasizes ethical conduct, transparency, and responsible sourcing. The correct approach involves a thorough evaluation of the proposed technology's impact on data security, privacy, and compliance with existing supply chain regulations. This includes assessing how the technology will handle sensitive supplier information, ensure data integrity, and maintain traceability throughout the supply chain. Adherence to the CPSM framework necessitates a proactive stance on risk management and a commitment to ethical technology adoption, ensuring that innovation does not compromise legal obligations or stakeholder trust. An incorrect approach would be to adopt the technology solely based on its perceived efficiency gains without a comprehensive risk assessment. This could lead to regulatory violations if the technology inadvertently exposes sensitive data, violates privacy laws, or creates new compliance challenges that are not addressed. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize cost savings over ethical considerations, such as implementing technology that relies on data collection practices that could be deemed exploitative or non-compliant with data protection principles. Furthermore, neglecting to involve relevant stakeholders, such as legal counsel or IT security experts, in the evaluation process represents a failure to exercise due diligence and can result in unforeseen compliance issues and ethical breaches. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining the problem and objectives. This is followed by identifying and evaluating potential solutions, considering their alignment with regulatory requirements, ethical principles, and organizational values. A critical step is conducting a thorough risk assessment for each option, including potential legal, ethical, and operational ramifications. Finally, the decision should be documented, and a plan for implementation and ongoing monitoring should be established to ensure continued compliance and ethical operation. Question 12. Quality control measures reveal a significant defect in a critical component sourced from a key supplier, impacting the ability to meet production deadlines. The defect appears to be a manufacturing anomaly specific to the last batch received. The supply chain manager must decide on the immediate course of action, which approach best aligns with professional supply chain management principles and regulatory expectations. Option A. Initiate internal rework on all received defective components without consulting the supplier to expedite the resolution. Option B. Proceed with production using the defective components, assuming the issue will not be noticeable to end users and can be addressed later. Option C. Immediately terminate the contract with the supplier and initiate a search for a new vendor to ensure uninterrupted production. Option D. Halt production. Conduct a joint root cause analysis with the supplier to identify and rectify the defect and determine appropriate corrective actions. The correct answer is C. Immediately terminate the contract with the supplier and initiate a search for a new vendor to ensure uninterrupted production. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in supply chain management where a critical quality issue arises unexpectedly, impacting production schedules and potentially customer commitments. The professional challenge lies in balancing the immediate need to resolve the quality defect with the long-term implications for supplier relationships, cost, and regulatory compliance. A hasty decision could lead to further complications, while an overly cautious approach might exacerbate the disruption. The CPSM framework emphasizes ethical conduct and adherence to regulations, making the decision-making process particularly sensitive. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic, data-driven investigation to understand the root cause of the quality issue and to assess its impact. This aligns with the principles of responsible supply chain management, which prioritize product integrity and customer safety. By engaging the supplier in a collaborative problem-solving effort, the organization upholds ethical sourcing practices and fosters a stronger, more transparent relationship. This approach also allows for informed decisions regarding corrective actions, potential recalls, and future prevention strategies, all while adhering to relevant industry standards and regulations. The focus is on a comprehensive solution that addresses the immediate problem and prevents recurrence, demonstrating due diligence and a commitment to quality. Incorrect approach is analysis, an approach that immediately seeks to replace the supplier without a thorough investigation, risks damaging a potentially valuable relationship, and may not address the underlying cause of the defect. This could lead to similar issues with a new supplier, and could be seen as an ethically questionable response if the original supplier was not given a fair opportunity to rectify the problem. Also bypasses the opportunity to learn from the current situation, which is a failure in continuous improvement. An approach that prioritizes expediting production with the defective materials, hoping the issue will go unnoticed, is a direct violation of ethical conduct and potentially regulatory requirements concerning product quality and safety. This demonstrates a disregard for customer well-being and could lead to significant legal and reputational damage. It prioritizes short-term expediency over long-term integrity and compliance. An approach that solely focuses on internal rework without involving the supplier fails to leverage the supplier's expertise in their own product and manufacturing process. This can be a costly and inefficient solution if the supplier could have provided a more effective or economical resolution. Ethically, it may also be seen as a missed opportunity for collaborative problem-solving, which is a cornerstone of effective supply chain partnerships. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that begins with thorough information gathering and root cause analysis. This involves assessing the severity of the quality issue, its potential impact on customers and operations, and the contractual obligations with the supplier. The next step is to engage the supplier collaboratively to identify and implement corrective actions. This process should be documented, and decisions should be made based on data, ethical considerations, and adherence to relevant regulations and industry best practices. The goal is to achieve a sustainable solution that protects the organization's reputation, customer interests, and regulatory standing. Question 13. Investigation of a global electronics manufacturer's supply chain reveals a heavy reliance on a single offshore supplier for a critical component, with limited alternative sourcing options and a lean inventory strategy to minimize carrying costs. Following a significant geopolitical event that disrupted shipping lanes and led to a prolonged shortage of this component, the manufacturer experienced substantial production delays and lost significant market share. Which of the following strategies, if implemented proactively, would have best mitigated the impact of this disruption and built greater supply chain resilience? Option A. Implementing a just-in-time inventory system across all product lines to further reduce operational costs. Option B. Establishing multiple, geographically dispersed suppliers for the critical component and maintaining strategic buffer stock levels at key distribution points. Option C. Relying on expedited shipping options only when a disruption is imminent. Option D. Focusing solely on negotiating longer-term contracts with the existing sole supplier to secure priority allocation during shortages. The correct answer is B. Establishing multiple, geographically dispersed suppliers for the critical component and maintaining strategic buffer stock levels at key distribution points. Explanation. This scenario presents a professionally challenging situation because it requires a strategic and proactive approach to managing potential disruptions within a complex global supply chain. The challenge lies in balancing the costs associated with building resilience against the potential catastrophic impacts of unforeseen events, such as geopolitical instability, natural disasters, or pandemics. Careful judgment is required to identify the most critical vulnerabilities and to implement appropriate mitigation strategies that align with the organization's risk appetite and financial capabilities. The correct approach involves a comprehensive and integrated strategy for building supply chain resilience. This includes implementing redundancy in critical supplier relationships and transportation routes, diversifying sourcing locations to reduce reliance on single points of failure, and developing robust agility to quickly adapt to changing circumstances. Furthermore, establishing clear crisis management protocols, detailed disaster recovery plans, and conducting regular scenario planning and stress testing are essential for preparedness. This approach is ethically and regulatorily sound as it demonstrates a commitment to business continuity, stakeholder protection, including customers, employees, and investors, and adherence to industry best practices for risk management, which are often implicitly or explicitly expected within the supply chain management profession. While specific regulations may vary, the overarching principle of due diligence in managing foreseeable risks is a universal professional expectation. An incorrect approach would be to solely focus on cost reduction without adequately considering the implications for supply chain resilience. This could lead to a brittle supply chain that is highly vulnerable to disruption. Such a failure to adequately prepare for foreseeable risks could be viewed as a breach of professional duty, potentially leading to significant financial losses, reputational damage, and even legal liabilities if contractual obligations cannot be met due to preventable disruptions. Another incorrect approach would be to implement a single, isolated resilience measure, such as only investing in disaster recovery planning, without addressing other critical aspects like redundancy and diversification. This piecemeal strategy would leave significant gaps in the overall resilience framework, making the supply chain susceptible to a wider range of threats. This demonstrates a lack of holistic understanding of supply chain risk management and a failure to implement a comprehensive strategy. A further incorrect approach would be to rely on ad hoc responses to crises as they arise, rather than establishing predefined crisis management plans and conducting regular scenario planning. This reactive approach is inefficient, often leads to suboptimal decision-making under pressure, and increases the likelihood of significant negative consequences. It fails to meet the professional standard of proactive risk mitigation and preparedness. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic risk assessment of the supply chain, identifying critical nodes and potential failure points. This should be followed by the development of a multifaceted resilience strategy that incorporates redundancy, diversification, and agility. Regular testing and refinement of these strategies through scenario planning and stress testing are crucial. Finally, clear communication and training for all relevant stakeholders on crisis management and disaster recovery protocols are essential to ensure effective execution when disruptions occur. Question 14. Process analysis reveals that our company's primary product line has a significant and growing carbon footprint, prompting internal and external pressure to improve environmental sustainability. We need to develop a strategic approach to reduce this footprint. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the principles of sustainable supply chain management and provides a robust foundation for meaningful environmental improvement? Option A. Source raw materials based solely on the lowest cost without considering their environmental impact or origin. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive life cycle assessment, LCA, to identify environmental hotspots and inform targeted interventions for carbon footprint reduction, green procurement, and circular economy principles. Option C. Implement a single, isolated initiative, such as switching to a slightly more fuel-efficient transportation method without a broader strategic review. Option D. Focus exclusively on reducing the amount of packaging material used for the product, as this is a visible and easily quantifiable area for improvement. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive life cycle assessment, LCA, to identify environmental hotspots and inform targeted interventions for carbon footprint reduction, green procurement, and circular economy principles. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in modern supply chain management, balancing cost efficiency with the growing imperative for environmental sustainability. The company is facing pressure from stakeholders and potentially regulatory bodies to reduce its environmental impact, specifically its carbon footprint. The challenge lies in identifying and implementing effective strategies that align with both business objectives and sustainability goals, without compromising operational integrity or introducing new risks. The need for a life cycle perspective is crucial, as short-term cost savings in one area might lead to greater environmental harm downstream. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves conducting a comprehensive life cycle assessment, LCA, to understand the full environmental impact of the product, from raw material extraction to end-of-life disposal. This data-driven method allows for the identification of key hotspots where environmental improvements can be most impactful. Based on the LCA findings, the organization can then prioritize initiatives such as sourcing materials with lower embodied carbon, optimizing transportation routes to reduce fuel consumption, and exploring circular economy principles like product redesign for recyclability or remanufacturing. This aligns with the principles of green procurement and carbon footprint reduction by providing a systematic and evidence-based foundation for decision-making. Ethically, it demonstrates a commitment to responsible environmental stewardship and transparency. Regulatory frameworks, while not explicitly detailed here, increasingly favor or mandate such comprehensive environmental impact assessments and reporting. Incorrect approaches analysis, focusing solely on reducing packaging material without considering the broader environmental impact of the product itself, is an incomplete and potentially misleading strategy. This approach might lead to superficial improvements while ignoring more significant environmental burdens elsewhere in the supply chain, such as manufacturing processes or raw material extraction. It fails to adopt a holistic life cycle perspective and may not achieve meaningful carbon footprint reduction. Prioritizing the cheapest available raw materials without evaluating their environmental credentials or origin is a direct contravention of sustainable procurement principles. This approach risks sourcing materials with high embodied carbon, unsustainable extraction practices, or significant pollution associated with their production, thereby undermining any efforts towards environmental sustainability and potentially leading to reputational damage or future regulatory scrutiny. Implementing a single, isolated initiative like switching to electric delivery vehicles without a broader strategy is a piecemeal solution. While this specific action contributes to carbon footprint reduction, it neglects other critical areas identified through a comprehensive assessment, such as material sourcing, manufacturing, or end-of-life management. This fragmented approach lacks the strategic depth required for genuine and lasting environmental sustainability. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach sustainability challenges by first establishing a clear understanding of the problem's scope and impact. This involves gathering data and utilizing analytical tools like life cycle assessment to identify the most significant areas for improvement. Decision-making should then be guided by a framework that integrates environmental, social, and economic considerations, the triple bottom line. This involves prioritizing initiatives that offer the greatest positive impact across these dimensions, are aligned with regulatory expectations, and contribute to long-term business resilience. Continuous monitoring and evaluation of implemented strategies are essential to ensure ongoing effectiveness and adaptation to evolving best practices and regulations. Question 15. Benchmark analysis indicates that a new supplier in a developing region offers significant cost savings on a critical component. However, preliminary inquiries suggest potential challenges regarding labor conditions and the origin of raw materials. Which of the following approaches best aligns with regulatory frameworks and ethical supply chain management principles for this situation? Option A. Prioritize the cost savings and proceed with the supplier, implementing a minimal compliance check that relies solely on the supplier's self-attestation of ethical practices. Option B. Reject the supplier outright due to the preliminary concerns, opting for a more established but potentially more expensive supplier to avoid any ethical risks. Option C. Engage the supplier, but immediately initiate a comprehensive due diligence process that includes verifying their adherence to a robust supplier code of conduct covering fair labor practices and conflict mineral sourcing, and establish clear traceability requirements for raw materials. Option D. Proceed with the supplier, assuming their compliance based on their stated business practices and the potential cost benefits, while deferring detailed ethical audits until after the initial contract period. The correct answer is D. Proceed with the supplier, assuming their compliance based on their stated business practices and the potential cost benefits, while deferring detailed ethical audits until after the initial contract period. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in supply chain management, balancing cost efficiency with ethical sourcing and compliance. The pressure to reduce costs can create a conflict with the imperative to ensure fair labor practices and transparency, especially when dealing with suppliers in regions with varying regulatory oversight and enforcement. The professional challenge lies in navigating these competing demands while upholding the organization's ethical commitments and adhering to relevant regulations, such as those pertaining to conflict minerals and anti-corruption. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive due diligence process that prioritizes transparency and ethical sourcing. This includes conducting thorough risk assessments of potential suppliers, verifying their adherence to a robust supplier code of conduct that explicitly addresses fair labor practices, anti-corruption, and conflict mineral sourcing. Implementing traceability mechanisms throughout the supply chain is crucial to confirm the origin of materials and ensure compliance with ethical standards. This approach aligns with the principles of corporate social responsibility, CSR, and demonstrates a commitment to responsible supply chain management, which is increasingly expected by stakeholders and often implicitly or explicitly supported by regulatory frameworks aimed at preventing human rights abuses and illicit financial flows. Incorrect approaches analysis, an approach that solely focuses on cost reduction without adequate ethical vetting of suppliers, is professionally unacceptable. This failure to conduct due diligence can lead to the inadvertent engagement with suppliers who violate fair labor laws, engage in corrupt practices, or source conflict minerals, thereby exposing the organization to significant reputational damage, legal penalties, and ethical breaches. An approach that relies on supplier self-declarations without independent verification is also flawed. While self-declarations are a starting point, they do not provide assurance of compliance. Without independent audits or third-party verification, an organization cannot confidently assert that its supply chain is ethically sound, potentially leading to non-compliance with regulations and ethical standards. An approach that prioritizes speed of onboarding over ethical considerations, assuming compliance based on a supplier's reputation alone, is also problematic. Reputations can be misleading, and a lack of rigorous, ongoing assessment can mask underlying ethical or legal violations. This oversight can result in significant downstream risks and a failure to meet CSR objectives. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach to supplier selection and management. This involves establishing clear ethical sourcing policies and a comprehensive supplier code of conduct that aligns with regulatory expectations and organizational values. Due diligence should be a continuous process, incorporating risk assessments, audits, and ongoing monitoring to ensure compliance with fair labor practices, anti-corruption measures, and conflict mineral regulations. Transparency and traceability should be integrated into supply chain operations to provide verifiable evidence of ethical sourcing. When faced with cost pressures, professionals must advocate for the long-term benefits of ethical sourcing, including risk mitigation and enhanced brand reputation, rather than compromising on fundamental ethical principles. Question 16. The review process indicates that a new automated sorting system for a high-volume distribution center is being considered to significantly reduce labor costs and increase throughput. However, the proposed system has not undergone a comprehensive risk assessment or a pilot testing phase, and the vendor's claims regarding accuracy and integration with existing inventory management software are largely unverified. The warehouse manager is under pressure from senior leadership to implement cost-saving measures immediately. What is the most professionally responsible course of action? Option A. Implement the automated sorting system immediately, relying on the vendor's assurances and the urgency for cost savings, while planning to address any issues that arise post-implementation. Option B. Proceed with the implementation of the automated sorting system, but instruct the team to manually double-check a significant percentage of sorted items to mitigate potential errors, accepting the increased labor cost this would entail. Option C. Delay the implementation of the automated sorting system until a thorough risk assessment is completed, a pilot program is conducted to validate performance and integration, and all findings are reviewed by relevant stakeholders. Option D. Reject the automated sorting system outright due to the lack of verification and inform senior leadership that the cost savings are not achievable with the current proposal, without suggesting alternative solutions. Correct answer is A. Implement the automated sorting system immediately, relying on the vendor's assurances and the urgency for cost savings, while planning to address any issues that arise post-implementation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between cost-saving measures and the ethical imperative to maintain product integrity and customer trust. The warehouse manager is pressured to expedite a process that could compromise quality and potentially lead to regulatory noncompliance or customer dissatisfaction, impacting the organization's reputation and financial stability. Careful judgment is required to balance operational efficiency with ethical responsibilities and adherence to supply chain best practices. The correct approach involves prioritizing a thorough investigation and adherence to established procedures before implementing any changes. This demonstrates a commitment to quality, safety, and regulatory compliance, which are foundational principles in supply chain management. Specifically, it aligns with the ethical guidelines of the CPSM program, which emphasize integrity, honesty, and responsible stewardship of resources. By following established protocols for evaluating new technologies and processes, the manager ensures that any changes are data-driven, risk-assessed, and ultimately beneficial to the organization and its stakeholders, without compromising product quality or customer service. This proactive and procedural approach mitigates risks associated with rushed implementation and potential errors. An incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate cost savings without adequate validation would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for established quality control measures and a potential violation of the ethical obligation to deliver products that meet specifications and customer expectations. Such an approach could lead to the distribution of substandard goods, resulting in product recalls, customer complaints, reputational damage, and potential legal or regulatory penalties. Another incorrect approach that involves bypassing established approval processes for new technologies, even if seemingly beneficial, is also professionally unsound. This undermines organizational governance and internal controls, creating a risk of implementing unvetted solutions that may not be compatible with existing systems, may not deliver the promised benefits, or may introduce new vulnerabilities. This demonstrates a lack of accountability and a failure to uphold the principles of due diligence expected of a supply chain professional. Further incorrect approach that involves accepting vendor assurances without independent verification or pilot testing is also problematic. While vendor relationships are important, relying solely on external claims without internal validation can lead to the adoption of ineffective or even detrimental solutions. This reflects a lack of critical thinking and a failure to exercise professional skepticism, which is essential for making sound supply chain decisions. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Identify the core issue and the pressures involved. 2. Consult relevant organizational policies, procedures, and ethical guidelines. 3. Gather objective data and evidence to assess the proposed change. 4. Conduct a thorough risk assessment, considering potential impacts on quality, cost, compliance, and customer satisfaction. 5. Seek input from relevant stakeholders, including operations, quality assurance, and IT. 6. If a new technology or process is involved, consider a pilot program or phased implementation. 7. Document the decision-making process and the rationale behind the chosen course of action. 8. Prioritize long-term organizational health and ethical conduct over short-term gains. Question 17. The audit findings indicate that a significant portion of key raw materials are sourced from suppliers with questionable labor practices and environmental compliance records, despite the company's stated commitment to ethical sourcing and sustainability. Which of the following approaches best addresses these findings within the context of supply chain sustainability and ethics, focusing on process optimization? Option A. Negotiate immediate price reductions with existing suppliers to offset potential future costs associated with compliance, while deferring deeper investigations into their practices. Option B. Implement a revised supplier qualification process that mandates comprehensive audits of labor practices and environmental impact, integrating these criteria directly into the supplier selection and performance management framework. Option C. Develop a new set of sustainability metrics and require suppliers to report on them annually, without altering the current supplier selection or performance evaluation processes. Option D. Conduct a one-time training session for the procurement team on ethical sourcing principles and update the company's supplier code of conduct to reflect sustainability goals. The correct answer is B. Implement a revised supplier qualification process that mandates comprehensive audits of labor practices and environmental impact, integrating these criteria directly into the supplier selection and performance management framework. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing operational efficiency with ethical sourcing and environmental responsibility, all within the context of supply chain sustainability. The audit findings highlight a potential disconnect between stated company values and actual procurement practices, necessitating a strategic response that upholds ethical standards and regulatory compliance. Careful judgment is required to identify the most effective and compliant path forward, ensuring long-term supply chain resilience and reputation. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review and revision of supplier selection criteria to explicitly incorporate sustainability and ethical labor practices. This aligns with the growing regulatory landscape and industry expectations for responsible supply chain management. By integrating these factors into the core of the procurement process, the organization demonstrates a commitment to ethical sourcing, reduces reputational risk, and can potentially uncover opportunities for process optimization that also enhance sustainability. This proactive stance is crucial for meeting evolving stakeholder demands and potential future regulations. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on cost reduction without considering the ethical implications of sourcing fails to address the root cause of the audit findings and risks perpetuating unsustainable or unethical practices. This could lead to significant reputational damage, legal repercussions if specific labor laws are violated, and a loss of consumer trust. Another incorrect approach that involves superficial supplier questionnaires without robust verification mechanisms is insufficient. While it appears to address the issue, it lacks the rigor needed to ensure genuine compliance and may mask ongoing ethical or sustainability concerns. This approach is unlikely to satisfy regulatory scrutiny or internal ethical standards. Finally, an approach that prioritizes immediate compliance with minimal effort, such as simply updating policy documents without implementing practical changes in supplier management, is also flawed. This creates a false sense of security and does not fundamentally alter procurement behavior, leaving the organization vulnerable to future issues and failing to achieve true supply chain sustainability. Professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic evaluation of audit findings, a thorough understanding of relevant ethical frameworks and potential regulatory requirements. Even if not explicitly detailed in the prompt, the principle of compliance is paramount, and a strategic assessment of how to integrate sustainability and ethical considerations into existing processes. This includes engaging relevant stakeholders, developing clear performance indicators, and establishing mechanisms for ongoing monitoring and improvement. Question 18. Assessment of how to respond to a request from the Finance Department to immediately reduce the cost of goods sold by 10% through supply chain adjustments, considering the impact on existing supplier relationships and the potential for compromising quality or compliance, requires a strategic and ethical approach. Which of the following actions best aligns with the principles of professional supply chain management as outlined in CPSM Module 2? Option A. Inform suppliers that payment terms will be extended by 30 days to improve cash flow without prior consultation or agreement. Option B. Initiate immediate renegotiations with all suppliers, demanding a 10% price reduction, and explore sourcing from new, lower-cost suppliers without extensive vetting. Option C. Engage key suppliers in a collaborative discussion to understand their cost structures and explore mutually beneficial adjustments, such as optimizing order quantities, improving logistics efficiency, or phasing in new material specifications, while also assessing the risk profile of alternative sourcing options. Option D. Accept proposals from suppliers offering significant price discounts in exchange for accepting materials that do not fully meet current quality specifications, provided the cost savings are realized. Correct answer is B. Initiate immediate renegotiations with all suppliers, demanding a 10% price reduction, and explore sourcing from new lower-cost suppliers without extensive vetting. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate cost-saving desires of one stakeholder group with the long-term strategic objectives and ethical considerations of supply chain management, as defined by the CPSM framework. The pressure to reduce costs quickly can lead to decisions that compromise supplier relationships, product quality, or regulatory compliance, all of which are critical to sustainable supply chain success. Careful judgment is required to identify solutions that address immediate concerns without jeopardizing future operational integrity or ethical standing. The correct approach involves a comprehensive assessment of supplier performance and risk, focusing on developing collaborative solutions with key suppliers. This aligns with the CPSM Module 2 emphasis on strategic sourcing and supplier relationship management. By engaging with suppliers to understand their challenges and explore mutually beneficial adjustments, such as revised payment terms or phased implementation of new requirements, the supply chain manager upholds ethical sourcing principles and fosters resilience. This approach prioritizes long-term value creation and risk mitigation, which are core tenets of professional supply chain management. It also implicitly adheres to ethical business practices by avoiding unilateral demands that could harm supplier viability, thereby maintaining a stable and reliable supply base. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate cost reduction through aggressive renegotiation or switching to lower-cost, unvetted suppliers fails to consider the broader implications. This can lead to regulatory breaches if new suppliers do not meet quality or safety standards, or if contractual obligations are violated. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of due diligence and can damage the organization's reputation and future sourcing capabilities. Another incorrect approach that involves delaying payments without consultation or agreement with suppliers can strain relationships, potentially leading to supply disruptions and legal disputes. This violates principles of fair dealing and can be seen as unethical, as it places undue financial burden on partners without proper communication or consent. A third incorrect approach that involves accepting substandard quality to meet cost targets directly compromises product integrity and can lead to customer dissatisfaction, product recalls, and potential legal liabilities, all of which are contrary to responsible supply chain management and ethical business conduct. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining the problem and identifying all relevant stakeholders and their objectives. Next, they should gather data and analyze the potential impacts of various solutions, considering both short-term and long-term consequences. This analysis should include an assessment of risks, ethical implications, and alignment with organizational strategy and regulatory requirements. The CPSM framework guides this by emphasizing strategic alignment, risk management, and ethical conduct. Finally, professionals should select the option that best balances competing interests while upholding ethical standards and ensuring the long-term health and resilience of the supply chain. Question 19. Upon reviewing the initial proposals for a new distribution center location, the supply chain team has identified several potential sites. One site offers significantly lower transportation costs due to its proximity to major highways, but environmental impact assessments indicate potential challenges with waste disposal regulations in that specific municipality. Another site is in a region with a strong labor union presence, which could lead to higher labor costs, but also offers robust worker protection standards. A third option is in a less developed area with lower land and labor costs, but lacks established transportation infrastructure. Considering the CPSM Module 2 focus on supply chain design and optimization, and the imperative to operate ethically and compliantly, which approach best balances these competing factors for a sustainable and resilient supply chain? Option A. Select the site with the most established transportation infrastructure and a history of strong worker protection, even if it means higher initial capital and operational expenses, and proactively engage with local authorities to address potential waste disposal challenges. Option B. Focus solely on the site with the lowest overall operational cost, assuming that regulatory compliance and labor standards can be met through minimal adherence to local minimums. Option C. Choose the site in the less developed area due to its significantly lower initial costs, with plans to develop transportation infrastructure over time and to implement labor practices that are cost competitive. Option D. Prioritize the site with the lowest transportation costs, assuming that any environmental compliance issues can be addressed through future investments and that labor costs in other regions are inherently less stable. The correct answer is D. Prioritize the site with the lowest transportation costs, assuming that any environmental compliance issues can be addressed through future investments and that labor costs in other regions are inherently less stable. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing competing stakeholder interests within the framework of supply chain design and optimization, specifically concerning facility location and transportation network design. The CPSM framework emphasizes ethical considerations and adherence to regulations, which are paramount in such decisions. The correct approach involves a comprehensive analysis that prioritizes long-term supply chain resilience, cost-effectiveness, and compliance with all applicable environmental and labor regulations. This includes evaluating potential facility locations based on proximity to suppliers and customers, transportation infrastructure, labor availability and cost, and the environmental impact of operations. Furthermore, it necessitates engaging with all relevant stakeholders, including operations, finance, and legal departments, to ensure alignment with organizational goals and regulatory requirements. Adherence to ethical sourcing principles and sustainability guidelines, as promoted by the CPSM, is crucial. An incorrect approach would be to solely focus on minimizing transportation costs by selecting a location that, while seemingly cost-effective in the short term, may lead to significant long-term environmental liabilities or violate labor laws. This could result in reputational damage, fines, and operational disruptions. Another incorrect approach would be to disregard the input of the legal and compliance departments, potentially leading to the selection of a site that does not meet regulatory standards for environmental protection or worker safety. This demonstrates a failure to uphold ethical responsibilities and a lack of due diligence in supply chain design. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with clearly defining project objectives and constraints, including regulatory compliance and sustainability targets. This should be followed by thorough research and data gathering on potential locations, considering all relevant factors. Stakeholder engagement is critical throughout the process to gather diverse perspectives and ensure buy-in. Finally, a robust risk assessment should be conducted for each viable option, with a clear justification for the chosen solution based on a holistic evaluation of economic, environmental, and social factors, all within the bounds of applicable regulations. Question 20. The efficiency study reveals that a significant portion of production lead time is attributable to the final assembly stage, which is currently managed under a make-to-stock strategy. Customer orders for this product line exhibit considerable variability in configuration, leading to frequent rework and delays when components are not readily available for specific configurations. Considering the principles of production planning and scheduling within the CPSM framework, which of the following adjustments to the production strategy would best address these issues while maintaining operational efficiency and customer responsiveness? Option A. Implementing a strict make-to-order (MTO) strategy for all customer requests, regardless of product complexity or typical demand patterns. Option B. Increasing raw material inventory levels to ensure all possible component combinations are readily available. Option C. Maintaining the current make-to-stock (MTS) strategy and focusing solely on improving the efficiency of the final assembly line without changing the overall approach. Option D. Transitioning to an assembled order auto production strategy for this product line. The correct answer is D. Transitioning to an assembled order auto production strategy for this product line. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals a significant bottleneck in the production line, leading to extended lead times and customer dissatisfaction. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a supply chain manager to balance competing demands, meeting customer needs, optimizing resource utilization, and adhering to production strategies that align with the company's overall business model. The decision on how to adjust production planning and scheduling directly impacts inventory levels, operational costs, and market responsiveness. Careful judgment is required to select a strategy that is not only operationally sound, but also ethically responsible and compliant with any relevant supply chain regulations or industry best practices, particularly those emphasized in the CPSM framework. The correct approach involves re-evaluating the current production strategy in light of the efficiency study's findings and considering a shift towards a more responsive model, such as assembled order auto, if customer demand is highly variable and customization is a key differentiator. This approach is right because it directly addresses the identified bottleneck by decoupling final assembly from initial component production, allowing for greater flexibility. In the context of the CPSM framework, this aligns with principles of customer focus and operational excellence. Ethically, it demonstrates a commitment to improving service levels and managing resources effectively, thereby fulfilling obligations to stakeholders. Regulatory compliance in this context primarily relates to ensuring that any changes do not violate contractual agreements with suppliers or customers regarding lead times or product specifications. An incorrect approach would be to simply increase raw material inventory without understanding the root cause of the bottleneck. This fails to address the underlying production scheduling or capacity issues and can lead to increased carrying costs, obsolescence, and waste, contradicting lean manufacturing principles. Ethically, it represents a failure to proactively manage the supply chain and could lead to financial losses that impact employees and shareholders. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the efficiency study and continue with the current make-to-stock (MTS) strategy, hoping demand will naturally align with production. This is professionally unacceptable, as it demonstrates a lack of responsiveness to critical operational data and a disregard for customer satisfaction. It also fails to leverage opportunities for improvement highlighted by the study, potentially leading to sustained inefficiencies and competitive disadvantage. From an ethical standpoint, it shows a lack of diligence in managing company resources and meeting market expectations. A third incorrect approach would be to implement a drastic, unanalyzed shift to make-to-order (MTO) for all products without considering the impact on lead times for standard items or the capacity required for immediate order fulfillment. While MTO can be effective for highly customized products, a blanket application without proper capacity planning and scheduling adjustments can lead to unmanageable lead times for customers accustomed to faster delivery, thus damaging customer relationships and potentially violating service-level agreements. This approach neglects the foundational principles of effective production planning and scheduling, which require a nuanced understanding of product demand and production capabilities. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic approach. 1. Understand the problem. Thoroughly analyze the efficiency study's findings to pinpoint the root cause of the bottleneck. 2. Evaluate strategic alignment. Assess how different production planning strategies, MTS, MTO, auto, align with the company's overall business strategy, market position, and customer value proposition. 3. Consider operational impact. Evaluate the implications of each strategy on capacity, lead times, inventory, and costs. 4. Assess risk and feasibility. Determine the practical feasibility of implementing changes and the associated risks. 5. Select and implement. Choose the strategy that best balances efficiency, customer satisfaction, and financial objectives, and develop a clear implementation plan. 6. Monitor and adjust. Continuously monitor performance and be prepared to make further adjustments as needed.